Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Loaded Questions podcast. Today, I'm very privileged to be joined by today's Fastbreak's Miami Heat and NBA writer, Nekias Duncan. Nekias, how are you?
I'm pretty good, man. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just enjoying a sunny Australian Sunday. What about you?
I'm just enjoying a pretty chill Saturday night in America, man.
That's the way. What's been happening?
Not much, man. I've been out all day today, but as far as writing, I've been working on the Spotlight series, looking at a guy that is going to garner more attention as he goes on this year. So I should have a Chicago piece up either tomorrow or Monday, so be looking out for that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll be jumping on that once it goes live.
All right.
So, how have you enjoyed the off season as a whole? It's been pretty hectic. Obviously, all that's been happening with your Heat and other teams, but how have you seen the whole off season?
Oh yeah, it's been a wild ride this summer. Big cultural shift. I think a big shift in expectations. We kind of don't really know what's going on or what to expect because there are so many question marks around the roster. But it's been exciting in an odd way, I'd say. I'm kind of anxious to see what's going to happen this year.
Yeah, it sort of feels like everyone can't wait to get started. It feels like such a long time until we get underway in 2 months because we don't really know what's going to happen outside of Cleveland and Golden State.
Right.
Do you see anything? Do you see any other possible final scenario?
It would take a lot of injuries for Cleveland and Golden State not to have like a part 3 in the finals.
Yeah.
But if I had a guess of anyone that could knock either one of them off, maybe the Clippers or Boston could make a run at either of those final spots.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I really think it's going to boil down to Golden State and Cleveland again.
Yeah, it really feels like the Clippers would have to play out of their minds to even have a chance of beating the Warriors, and particularly now that they've picked up someone like Durant, and they already had enough trouble covering wings, the Clippers, so
right.
It's very hard to see. So we can dive straight into the Heat. Obviously, a lot has been happening in Miami. It's been a monumental off-season on all fronts. I know you were never a massive D. Wade fan towards the end of his tenure because of his decline, but how did you perceive his departure?
Well, I had pretty much been expecting it and low-key calling for it throughout the year.
Yeah, for sure.
Not that I didn't like him or anything, but it was just, he was getting up in age and he wanted his money, and rightfully so. But considering the rest of Miami's roster, it just didn't seem plausible. So seeing him, it was still kind of a shock that he actually left. But I'm okay with the move because I think it made much more long-term sense to go ahead and let him go.
So you don't buy into, or how do you perceive sort of the anger from the Miami Heat fans? Do you think that's fair, or are you sort of just take the long-term view that you guys needed to move forward?
Well, I personally side with the long-term view, but I do understand the anger of it. Dwayne Wade has obviously meant a lot to the Heat franchise, both on and off the court. So, obviously that's going to be a huge emotional rift there. But, he's 34 going on 35, and you've already made a 5-year commitment to a point guard that needs to push the pace, and Dwayne Wade doesn't do that. So, it was going to come to a point that he was going to go anyway, rather retirement or elsewhere or otherwise. But I'm fine with it, honestly.
And what sort of effect do you think that'll have on Goran Dragic? Do you think we'll see an improvement in his play because he hasn't really lived up to his contract thus far?
Yeah, I think we saw, even with him playing with Wade last year, after the All-Star break, once they kind of downsized with Bosh being out and they started playing faster, you got to see a lot of that 2013-14 Goran Dragic. They got to run the show. Wade played more off-ball. Usage rate was still around the same, but Goran's went up, and Goran got more comfortable, and you kind of get to say how good he actually is. So without Wade there, it's going to be more of an onus on him, but I think replacing Wade with a guy like Josh Richardson or Tyler Johnson, who are obviously less talented, but because they can spread the floor and they can run, I think that fits more with what Goran wants to do, and I think he's going to look a lot better this year, assuming he's healthy.
Well, it's a lot better to get players who don't need as much of the ball and don't need the ball in their hands to be effective, so it should be an interesting transition.
Right.
So what about the other departures? So obviously you lost Luol, Deng to the Lakers, Gerald Green to the Celtics, I believe, and Joe Johnson to the Jazz. Are those pivotal losses in your mind?
The Joe Johnson one isn't to me. I think the biggest loss would be Luol Deng just because of his veteran leadership, his versatility on both ends of the floor. And you saw how well he played after the All-Star break playing the 4.
Yes, yeah.
But I think Justice Winslow is the 3 of the future, and he showed last postseason, granted it was due to injuries, but showed last postseason that he can play some 4, and even late in that Toronto series he's playing some 5. It's because Miami didn't have any bigs left. So I think letting him grow on both ends, showcasing his versatility on both ends, I think it was time for Deng to move on anyway, especially at the price tag that he got in Los Angeles.
Yeah, you can't really justify paying him that much long term, even though he had been really impressive at the 4, and even Joe Johnson had too. But yeah, no, you had to move forward considering the money they wanted. So you spoke about lack of bigs, but you guys managed to hold on to Hassan Whiteside. Was that a surprise? Because it sort of felt like at the last minute that he was moving from Miami.
Yeah, I kind of felt like 2-3 days before he made the decision, kind of felt like Dallas was going to be the spot for him, just in terms of the pitch they could give him. Obviously, the max money was going to be the same, but I think they would have been able to offer him more touches off the bat. I think they kind of vibe with him wanting to prove himself as a top-tier center, but Miami pulled it off. So I'm kind of glad that he got the max, so now it's time to see what he's got.
Do you think having the money now will affect his play at all? Because there is the suspicion that could happen.
I've heard concerns throughout, talking to other Heat fans and other Heat writers and stuff. Personally, I don't have much of an issue. I'm not too afraid. I think that he's going to set out to prove that he's worth the money instead of just relaxing because he has it. Just because how wild his journey has been already. I don't think he's just going to say, "Woo, I made it. That's it." I think he has that perpetual chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, I think the chip on his shoulder certainly works to his advantage. He's always dying to prove himself, and I don't think getting paid is going to change that. I'm just fascinated to see what he can do with a bigger role now, because obviously you've lost a few players who need the ball, and so he should naturally get more touches as a result.
Yeah, I think if you paid attention to Miami after the All-Star break last year, him and Goran Dragic finally started getting some chemistry on court. Goran started throwing them more lobs. Hassan started setting better screens for him. So I think now that there's going to be more space on the floor and they might play a little more up-tempo, I think we can see an uptick in production for Hassan.
Do you think that the roster that sort of stands now, do you think that will suit Coach Spo's coaching style?
I think he will like it in terms of the different options that he has lineup-wise. And I also think that this team is more equipped to run. And Spo has always been a pace and space guy at heart, but he just hadn't been able to run it because of the personnel. So I think now this will be the first time we actually will see a full-blown, we're going to get up and down the floor instead of just getting into offense early. So I'm kind of excited to see what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and I don't think on the whole Miami are getting a lot of attention. I think they're getting probably talked down a bit because of their departures. So they'll probably work in your favour this season.
Yeah, I think there are going to be a lot of motivated guys on the team this year. I mean, I can understand the skepticism, especially with the big question mark around Chris Bosh, and I think we're going to get into that later. But I do think, even though there's probably a downgrade in talent, I think the actual fits on the roster may surprise some people. I think these guys can gel together if they can stay healthy and kind of produce some chemistry early on.
Yeah, and I don't think they're under any pressure to do that. I think the roster will actually fit together quite well because of the way that they'll all want to play. So that's going to be really fascinating. Did you think that were you happy that Tyler Johnson's contract was matched when New Jersey put out their offer?
If I had to put a percentage on it, I would say 55% I'm okay with it, 45% I'm not. Because I really like Tyler Johnson as a player and definitely love him as a personality. If you have time, check out his story and just what he had to go through to get to where he is. Yeah. And his family's awesome. He's awesome. So I'm fine. I'm glad that he's back in Miami. But I don't know. There's such a... we don't have any clue on what Miami's going to do at the 2 spot this year. So it's kind of hard to get a gauge on how much he will play. I'm sure he's going to get a lot of minutes regardless. It's kind of hard to pinpoint what his role is going to be so early. So he'll have a couple of years to prove himself and establish himself as either a starting two or backup guard. They can kind of give that punch of what we've seen the last couple of years until that contract skyrockets. And then it's really going to get interesting to see, A, if he's worth it at that point, and B, if he's not, if he can be moved because his contract's going to be so high.
Well, yeah, because the last 2 years are backloaded heavily, aren't they? So the first couple of years he only makes, around 10 to 12 million, but then the last 2 years are backloaded to about 15 million each?
No, I think it's around 5-ish million the first 2 years, and then it skyrockets to 18 and 19 million the last 2 years.
Well, then they must be thinking that he's going to be a starter long term.
I guess it really depends because Josh Richardson came out of nowhere last year. So
I think
really on him is high now. So that's the other part that kind of confuses me about it, because now if Josh Richardson becomes even half of what people think he can, which is a legitimate, top 10, top 12 two-way shooting guard, then Tyler Johnson as a high, as a high minute six man making $18 or $19 million is going to be iffy even in this NBA climate.
Yeah,
and
no, definitely.
Based on the last couple of years, he hasn't really shown the instincts as a point guard, so you can't really say he's going. I mean, we don't know how comfortable he is at that spot.
Yeah, no, definitely. So does adding Dion Waiters into that mix? I mean, it's a low risk move. It obviously won't cost you guys too much. He's obviously looking to have a good year and get paid. What does he project as for you with the Heat?
If I had a guess, I would imagine that he's the backup shooting guard, and him and Tyler Johnson kind of split ball handling duties off the bench. I think he's going to be fine defensively. He already has those instincts, and you put him with a guy like Spo, I think he's going to bring even more out of him. But I just have no clue what to expect out of him on the offensive end. And that excites me, and it also scares me, but it doesn't really matter too much in the grand scheme because this seems like a transition year anyway.
Man, I spent the last year and a half watching him in Oklahoma City, and it's frightening in a weird way because some nights he just has zeros across the board, and then other nights he'll get going. He'll hit 4 or 5 from 3. He's such a difficult player to figure out because he has this outdated sort of game, and if he just sticks to what he can be good at, which is hitting spot up threes, and he's a really good on ball defender, he can be really valuable. But sometimes he gets caught up in those old bad habits of driving and taking horrible shots at the rim and screaming out and one. It's going to be an interesting year at minimum for you guys in South Beach.
Yeah, see, he makes Mario Chalmers seem like Kawhi Leonard on the court, and especially in terms of confidence. So, if Dion can stay within himself, I don't think this could be a bad move at all. I think even in a worst-case scenario, it's a one-year deal, and Miami has like 12 shooting guards on the roster. So if he bombs out, he's not going to play. It's not really going to hurt them in the long term. But I don't know. Dion, I mean, if he can keep knocking down threes at a high clip and he can defend, as you said, then Spo's definitely going to find a role for him. And if Tyler Johnson doesn't improve as a ball handler or as an initiator, then Dion's going to have a role regardless off the bench.
How do you perceive the team defensively? I mean, obviously it's a team built to run. It's a very small roster on the whole. It's putting a lot of pressure on Hassan Whiteside at the defensive end. How do you see them handling that over the course of the season?
Well, I am actually pretty confident about the end. Obviously, with anything in Miami at this point, it's also going to depend on Chris Bosh. And I think this is where he'll be missed more than anywhere. Because now, last year Bosh goes down, Luol Deng slides to the 4, and he can guard 2, 3, sometimes 4 positions in a pinch anyway. With no Bosh now, your starting power forward is maybe Derrick Williams, who's one of the 5 or 6 worst defenders at his position.
Yeah.
Or unless they slide James Johnson in there, and then you don't know if he can knock down anything. So, I do like Miami on the perimeter. Goran had an underrated defensive year, and I'll probably talk about that a little later on in my series, just to go ahead and throw that teaser out there. But I think Goran, Tyler Johnson, who can defend, Josh Richardson, who can defend, Justice Winslow, who can really defend, Hassan Whiteside, who in the second half of the year his impact actually matched his numbers, and he became one of the best interior defenders in the NBA instead of just a great shot blocker.
Yeah.
So I think, if nothing else, this Miami Heat team's going to defend.
So I sort of see them as, I suppose, based on your perception as well, probably an above-average defensive team. Like, what would you say, top 10?
I would definitely say top 10, maybe top 8. If Bosh plays, I think you can pencil them in at top 8.
Yeah, no, for sure. If Bosh plays, you can almost argue that they're a top 5 defense because of their versatility and because of their paint protection. But
right.
I suppose the offense is the question because you have so many streaky shooters now on the roster.
Right, and I think it's really, like I said, we really get to see Goran back in his element. So I do think, even if Bosh is down, you're going to add another athlete in Derrick Williams or James Johnson, who are half the players of Bosh, but both of those guys are more comfortable in a running environment than Bosh. So I think Goran can lift the offense, and we're really going to see just how much on-ball juice Justice Winslow and Josh Richardson have, because both of them didn't really have many creating opportunities last year. But now we're likely going to see both of them in the start lineup, if I had to guess. So we're going to see just how much they have as far as shot creators.
Yeah, for sure. Now, before we get into the Chris Bosh situation, which will probably take us a little bit of time, because I know you've got quite a few thoughts on it, how do you perceive the James Johnson, Willie Reed, Derrick Williams moves? I actually liked all of your small moves because they weren't bloated contracts. They're all sort of low-risk, high-reward moves. How did you see those 3 contracts in particular?
Yeah, see, it's kind of hard for me to talk to them because, they're all coming from other teams and their fan bases hate them for whatever reason. So it seems like if I give them any kind of optimism, I either come off as uninformed or as biased. But I understand all of the signings. I've been pining for Willie Reed forever, and I'm glad he's here. Derrick Williams, if he can improve at all defensively, I think him playing with the second unit and getting out the run, I think that's going to fit him nicely, and the culture around Miami is going to help him as well. James Johnson, I like his defensive versatility, if nothing else, and I think he could, take some pressure off of Justice whenever they play together, or if Justice gets in foul trouble or something like that. So I'm fine with those moves, and they're all one-year deals. So.
Yeah, no, I really like the James Johnson move. I've always been a big fan of his, though I know he is such a hit-and-miss shooter. And I've always really liked Willie Reed's game. And Alex Kennedy, I know whether you saw it over the offseason, Alex Kennedy from Basketball Insiders wrote a really nice piece about Willie Reed. And, I'm really curious to see their impact. I suppose I perceive Derrick Williams the same way I perceive Dion, which is you sort of take whatever you can get with those two because it feels like you have no idea what to expect.
Right. The talent is there, but the consistency isn't. And in the case of Dion, he thinks he's so much better than he is. It just kind of amplifies everything when he's in one of his moods.
No, well, that's it. And for some reason, his moods disappeared during the playoffs, which I did not expect. And then he disappeared for the last 4 games of the Warriors series. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen there?
It's going to be fun to watch regardless.
Yeah, they're going to be a sneakily weird league pass team this season, I think. So Chris Bosh, so talk to me about that situation. What's going to happen? What do you think should happen? Yeah, just talk to me.
Oh, man, it's so tough because if you kind of read about Bosh or hear about him or hear him speak or things of that nature, he's one of the most genuine guys in not just basketball, but in all of sports. I mean, he's a really awesome personality. And even with all the crap he took, which was totally unfair during the Big 3 era, he was one of the most important players on and off the court for that team. And to kind of see him transition into a leadership role, and he finally got his touches back in 14-15 before the first bout of blood clots, and then it happened again last year. You want to see him on the court because he's so good and he can do so many things. At the same time, you care for him as a person because he's not just one of those give cliche answers, stay quiet type dudes. He's really a great person with a family and things of that nature. So you don't want to put him in jeopardy. So I mean, it's just a tough thing to deal with for fans. So I can just imagine just how tough that situation is for him, his family, the Heat organization, things of that matter.
Are you getting many murmurs as to what the likelihood of him playing is?
Personally, I haven't heard much. The last I've seen was from Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, I want to say, where Bosh and the team were still kind of going back over options to see what Bosh could do, and Bosh is trying to convince Miami to let him take some new blood thinning medication that will be out of his system for game nights and things of that nature. So I think from what I read, Bosh approached the Heat with that idea last year, and they weren't for it. So I'm not sure if they'll change their mind on that since he's had more time to recover and things like that. But there really isn't a read on if he's going to play or not. And now we're approaching September. We really don't know.
Is it wrong to say that probably the perception is Bosh is adamant that he's going to play, but the Heat are taking a very much a safety-first position in a position that they almost don't want him to play?
I think that's fair. And I think because they've been so quiet, you're also starting to hear more of the negative side, where it's just not, hey, we don't want this guy to play because we don't want something tragic to happen. It's also, hey, if he can't play and he has to medically retire, his contract's up and comes off the books in mid-February, and that helps Miami become major players in free agency next year. So you can't be naive and think that maybe that isn't at least a 3 or 4% factor in that.
Yeah, it has to be.
But I do think Miami's kind of trying to save Chris from himself if they feel like he's still at risk.
Yeah, I suppose it's so hard for us to know because we don't know the finer details. The Heat certainly know more about his long-term health than we do, things like that. So I suppose it's hard for us to judge wholeheartedly on the situation.
Right, and even if Bosh finds a doctor that'll say, hey, well, if he can do this and we can clear him, they aren't Miami Heat doctors. So even if Bosh finds an independent guy, he still has to get that clear with the Heat, and maybe if something like that happens, then maybe Bosh goes to the NBPA again to see if they can try to help lobby for him to play. So, I mean, this thing is so quiet, so it's scary, but at the same time, it could really blow up if Bosh feels like not only does he feel fine, but I have a doctor telling me that I can play, and you're still trying to hold me out for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because it really has that potential to turn into something messy if the Heat say no again and Bosh gets the all clear. Just like you said, it's sort of simmering at the moment.
Right, you kind of heard those whispers last year during the playoffs, and even Heat fans at that time were like, okay, Chris, why are you publicly pressing for this now? We know that you want to play, and, we want to see you play. But at the same time, Miami's in a playoff run right now, and you're kind of coming off as selfish. And then you have another sect saying, hey, we're in the middle of a playoff run right now. Chris Bosh says he can play, and he's a multi-time all-star who doesn't rely on athleticism. Let's get him out there. So, it's really... It's an emotional type situation. It's very serious at the same time. It's a lot to cover. So, as we know more, there's going to be more to talk about with it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the thing I appreciate probably about it is I like how Bosh has handled it. Some stars would be very public about it, and if they wanted to play, they'd be out there in the media putting pressure on, but he's handled it in a typically Chris Bosh professional manner. And I really appreciate that perspective on it.
Yeah, I think he's been a trooper up until maybe that week and a half stretch during the playoffs where you started hearing, hey, I'm feeling good, I want to play, and he starts pressing the play a little bit, sending out. We have Adrian Bosh tweeting out some things and getting retweeted and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he's been fine. The Heat and him have been talking from all things I've heard or read. So I think we're going to get a resolution. We just don't know what's going to come about before that or what that resolution actually is.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been doing projections for each team. I've just been trying to put rough projections together, and I have the Heat at 38 and 44. I was just wondering what your outlook on the team was going into the season.
I think 38 wins is a reasonable ceiling if Chris Bosh doesn't play.
Yeah, so that's what it's based on for me.
Yeah. If Chris Bosh comes back healthy, then I could see Miami flirting in that 45 to 50 win range, honestly. Because I think even though Dwayne Wade is extremely talented, the fit was kind of awkward. And what he's good at, as far as the late game playmaking and the tough isolation shots, things of that nature, that matters more in the postseason when teams are scheming and taking away your top sets and things of that nature than the regular season. So I don't think you're going to really feel the Wade loss that much during the regular season if Miami's able to run. So I do think if Bosh doesn't play, I think 38 wins is fine, or maybe they can sneak the 40 or 41 and either barely miss the playoffs or sneak in at the 8th seed and get annihilated by Cleveland. But if Bosh comes back, then I could see them as a 4th or 5th seed, or maybe 3rd, depending on what the rest of the conference does. And they can kind of make a second round push or something of that nature.
Well, yeah, and probably the roster doesn't have as many questions about health besides Bosh compared to years gone by, because you've had older rosters in years gone by. There's been more injury concerns.
Mm-hmm. Especially with Wade, when he put out one of his healthiest seasons of his career last year, almost out of the blue. So it's going to be kind of interesting to keep an eye on that situation in Chicago, just to see, hey, was this a flash in the pan because he got himself in shape and he was in a contract year, or did he really find a regimen that works for him and he can kind of continue his career?
Are you going to be watching any Chicago games?
I try to watch a little bit of everybody anyway, so I'll definitely be catching some of their games. I do want to see just how the Rondo Wade Butler experiment works, but I'm not emotionally invested in it like other Heat fans that want to see either Wade, do what he does, put up 20, or just want to see him flame out because they're hurt that he left.
Now, I've been following you for quite a while, obviously. You cop quite a lot from the citizens of Dwayne Wade stan. And how do you find that? Because obviously you're on the other side of the fence to most Heat fans. So how did you receive just being on that side of the argument?
It didn't bother me too much because I understood it. And I know I'm a different type of fan that I don't get emotionally invested in like rivalries or in specific players and things of that nature, unless I'm just trolling people. Like I love Mario Chalmers because he gives you so much troll material. But it really didn't bother me that much because I understood the emotional aspect of it, but it just didn't matter that much to me. So I could say, okay, I love Dwayne, but he's also about to turn 35 in January. And his usage rate is like 5 or 6 points higher than Goran's. And he wasn't engaged all the time defensively and stuff like that. So I kind of put my emotions to the side on that, and that bothered some people because it's like, hey, Dwayne Wade's the greatest thing that ever happened to this franchise. How can you just act like he's another player? So I got it, but, it just didn't really affect me that much.
Yeah, no, I can sort of relate because when I posted my top 20 players currently in the NBA, I didn't have Wade on the list, and the most common response of abuse or negativity that I got is, where is D Wade? Where is D Wade? And I did my shooting guard list and Wade wasn't on it, and people were just losing their minds. It's just, it's amazing how that emotion can take over. And how are you able to separate? Like you said, you're a different kind of fan. How are you able to do that? And why?
I think, part of that is probably because I cheer for Miami from a distance. I think maybe if I was born and raised in Miami or in that South Florida region and things, I think maybe I would be more emotionally attached. But, so I like the franchise first, and Dwayne Wade's also awesome. So it was kind of like, hey, he's great, but, I'm a Heat guy. So I kind of aligned myself to a long-term view anyway. So once I saw, Miami's on-off splits and stuff like that, I was like, okay, well, I love Dwayne and thank him for everything he's done, but at some point, this ride has to come to an end. So I kind of made my bet with that early on. So, as more things came out late last year, and people were like, whoa, wait, what's going on with the relationship with Riley and Wade, things like that. I'm like, hey, I've been saying this for months. Like, it might be time to let him go. And I'm not sure if you got to read the Why I Hate Dwayne Wade piece I wrote back in, I want to say, February or March.
No, I remember it.
Oh, yeah. So I kind of after going back and forth with Heat fans throughout the year on there, I was like, okay, well, let me write an article fully explaining why I feel the way I do, where I don't really hate him, but I hate the position that I'm in when it comes to him, because, you know, you want to be emotional and you want the franchise staple to stay forever, but at the same time, if it's, you know, if he shouldn't be a part of your long-term plans, then you kind of have to cut bait at some point.
No, I agree. I think I have a similar view in the way that I perceive what happens with the Thunder. Besides maybe what happens with Kevin Durant, because he's the reason that I became a Thunder fan, because I followed him when he was at Texas and things like that. But I sort of understand, because I wrote an article from Kevin Durant's perspective after he left, and it blew up because people were so surprised to see a Thunder writer write something in support of him, because so many people were, you know what it was like, people were just picking sides, and it was very messy. Fans were hurt, writers were hurt. It was just crazy.
Yeah, man.
To come back to the Heat. No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I had a quick question for you, since we're kind of on this thing. Where were you on the Royce Young thing? Because I saw him catching a lot of flack for some of the stuff that he was writing, and I didn't see much issue with what he said or things that he said, but a lot of Thunder fans and other guys from other fan bases had issue with him. So did you kind of get into that, or were you not really paying attention?
Oh, no, for sure. Royce is my favourite Thunder writer. He's my guy. I was completely okay with what he did. I actually think bias in writing is okay. I think that it's worse to pretend that you don't have bias. I think that all beat writers have bias. You spend all this time with the team. You have personal relationships with those guys. Royce was very close with KD. They were constantly texting, things like that. They were friends. I think Royce maybe felt slighted in the way that things went down. I don't have a problem with it, but I understand why other people did, even though I didn't have a problem with it myself. I think there's a natural perception that OKC are very defensive of their franchise. I think that's true. But I think that a lot of other teams have writers who are exactly the same. So I don't know. I just didn't have a massive problem with it. And I guess, like, I spoke with Josh about it, Josh Everly, when Josh came on here, and we had very differing perspectives. But I guess it depends what you prefer. I don't have a massive problem with homerism, but some do. So it is what it is to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so back to the Heat quickly. I've got to ask you about something as well before we go. But back to the Heat. So going into the season, will you consider yourself an optimist, or are you a cynical type of viewpoint?
I kind of feel like I'm in the middle. I think my high projection of Miami is higher than most, because I think if they gel and if they run and if they stay healthy, I don't think there's going to be a huge drop-off. And I'm sure other people look at the roster like, dude, Josh Richardson is your starting shooting guard. He averaged like 7 points a game last year. And you just lost Dwayne Wade, who put up almost 20. But I do think Miami can be fine. But if they aren't, then I'm also okay, because this draft is supposed to be ridiculously deep. And they're especially deep at point guard. So maybe Goran Dragic could kind of get some trade whispers going around his name if Miami starts off in the hole. So, I mean, I'm fine either way. As long as Josh Richardson and Justice Winslow get plenty of reps and we get to see or get a better picture of what their potential is, and we get to see how Hassan responds, I think as long as those three stay healthy and grow, that's probably top priority over how many wins we get. If all three of those guys grow and Miami wins 45 games, then great. If those three grow and Miami's a lottery team, then great. You know, it's really about those three guys moving forward.
So based on you saying that you're probably higher on the team than others, would you consider that? Would your viewpoint be that the Miami roster, as it stands now, is a little bit underrated by the wider public?
Yeah, I would say yes. I think they're a bit underrated. Not because of the talent, but I think people are underestimating how much fit matters in the NBA. So, like, in the case of shooting guard, you know what I'm saying, Josh Richardson can't tie Dwayne Wade's shoes at this moment. But when your point guard is Goran Dragic, then having a guy in Josh Richardson who can shoot threes at a high clip, can defend at a high clip, and, you know, the defense over rotate somewhere, Josh Richardson has the ability to attack a closeout and he can finish over anybody. So having that kind of a secondary guy who doesn't necessarily take touches away from Goran may be a better fit, even though he isn't a better player than Dwayne Wade or something like that. So I think in terms of the overall roster, Miami definitely dipped in talent, but I do think in terms of play style and who Miami already has on the roster, I think these guys can fit together better. So it's really going to boil down to just how quickly they can click or if they click at all.
No, I like that because I sort of agree. I think when a player leaves, we're too quick to assume that one guy is replacing that player when that's not true at all. It's exactly what you said. Better things will come from Dragic. Wade's minutes will be spread between multiple players, so we shouldn't just judge it in a vacuum of sorts.
Right.
So one thing I wanted to ask you, and because you brought it up when we were preparing for the show, it was your Woj story. So tell me your Woj story.
Oh, man. Woj and Mark Spears are kind of the reasons that I got into writing as heavy as I did. Going back a few years, I think you like the page, NBA Talk on Facebook. That's kind of where I got my writing start because I wanted to be in the men on that page. So they were looking for guys and they didn't know who they wanted, and I really wanted that position. So the way I kind of got in was I was sending one of their main admins free agency news. So they, at that time, Twitter wasn't as big as it is now, and most people were like, "Hey, I want to wait till I see it on ESPN before I believe what the news is." So at that point, Woj and Mark Spears and guys like that from Yahoo, they were getting news up and tweeting it out some 45 minutes, an hour and a half before Mark Stein or Brian Windhorst gets their news out. So I'm sending the guys at NBA Talk info, like, hey, this guy signed here, there's a trade, So they were getting they were posting news on that page before other Facebook pages were.
Yeah.
So from there, that's kind of how I got in, and then that's when I started writing for them and writing different long form pieces and analysis and opinion pieces and stuff like that. And that kind of led to me creating my Twitter account. And from there, that's where I got noticed by the name's jumbling. Mike Pendleton and Mark Gunnels at Full Scale Sports. I'm not sure if the site's still up now, but that was where I really started. And from there, I've been writing ever since. And now I'm at today's Fastbreak. So my writing career it kind of started on Facebook, and without me getting free agency news from Woj before anybody really knew who he was in the mainstream, and then I kind of wouldn't be where I am.
Yeah, that is quite a story. I was so curious when you posted that on Twitter, what that was going to be. So, because obviously I don't know, because I've commented. I remember way back in the day before I started writing. I remember you putting so many things out on that NBA Talk page. I was a massive follower of that, and for so long, like me and my brother used to there's not many good Facebook pages when it comes to the NBA. They tend to be very biased, or they use the wrong sort of stats. You know what I mean? They can be very trashy, but NBA Talk was always very good for content. It was good with even contract numbers. You had one of you guys was a salary cap guy, and you guys all launched Twitters from there. Yeah, no, I love that.
Oh yeah, so that's when people ask me, hey, or they come to me, hey, I want to start writing. How did you start? I'm just like, I'm probably not the best person to ask because I didn't get this professional start. I literally started on Facebook, and things just kind of snowballed from there. So, I guess I can kind of speak to the randomness of it doesn't matter where you start, it's kind of where you're going.
Yeah. But,
I don't have a traditional story at all. So.
Oh, well, neither do I, mate. I'm in Australia, so I can pretty much relate to that because I'm on the other side of the world.
Right.
No, thanks so much for joining me today, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, man. Anytime.
So you can hit up Nekias NBA on Twitter. I'll be tweeting out his handle and this podcast once the show goes live. You can catch all his articles on today's Fast Break. He's really good with the Heat and general NBA. He's been doing a few. You did something on Tyler Zeller the other day and things like that. You've been doing some spotlights.
Yeah, it was Cody Zeller.
Cody Zeller.
I'm going through every team. So yeah, Chicago should be coming up next. I'm going in alphabetical order from there. So
awesome. So keep an eye out for those. You can find me at Adam Joseph Sport, Loaded Q's podcast. You can find the podcast on iTunes, the W2M Network, and Last Word on Sports. And we will see you next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.